Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Presence of a Mind presented by Cloud9 and Kaiser Permanente. I'm Alana. That's Greg. I hope I'm doing this to the right side.
No, you didn't.
No, that's Greg.
Yeah, that's Greg. That's me.
We make mistakes. It's okay. And we are here today to talk about debunking therapy myths, which is something that I'm actually pretty excited about. I've had some terrible therapy experiences and some really positive ones. And I feel like it's kind of important to talk about, that broad spectrum. So that's what we're jumping into today. But for anyone who's not familiar with the show, this is an ongoing series. We are live on Twitch every second Thursday, 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. We'll take questions from the chat on Cloud9. I'm also streaming this one on my Twitch, so we will mostly be interacting with the Cloud9 chat if you guys want to jump over there and ask questions. We also have a psychiatrist we have access to who we can ask questions to real time. So a lot of very informed people, and we will have a bunch more informed people joining us on the show today. But first up, just how are you guys doing? I like to check in on that first. How are you doing, Greg?
I'm good, Alana. I moved last week. I was off the grid, barely looked at the internet. It was very interesting. It was very different for me. But I came back energized, and I'm ready and excited for the show.
How about you, Khalif? What have you been up to?
I'm good. It's been the most busy week of weeks for me, but it's been really, really good. And but I'm also I really want to steal that proton pack off of Greg's.
Isn't
Greg's
it good?
wall.
You don't even see it though. You're talking about things they can't even
just
see.
see the
You know what I
cable.
mean?
You can just see the cable.
You see the cable here. You see the neutrona wand there. Right? Little ghost trap up there.
Oh,
It is fantastic.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, well, moving is a whole exhausting thing. You've mostly got through it, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, you know how it is. We will have boxes in this place forever. But yeah, like for the most part, it's set up and we're back to, having free time and able to hang out and enjoy it.
Yeah. Khalif, I know you've done some crazy busy hosting stuff this week.
Yeah. I was hosting DICE last week, and then this week hosted day one of Games Beat Summit, which was fantastic. It was a 8 to 5 gig, and it was awesome to be able to see so many cool people in the industry kind of making it happen and making the industry super cool. So it was great.
I've given you as many props as I possibly can on the Twitter, so I'll definitely do it here on the Twitch. Also, I'm talking like a grandmother. You say you hosted DICE. Like, no, Jess and I co-hosted the DICE Awards. You dominated DICE. Like, you were on the DICE Awards with us in the third chair, but you went, how many developer roundtables did you do for the DICE Awards and for DICE in general?
23.
23. They were 30
panels.
minutes apiece, ladies and gentlemen, with a 30-minute, tech setup, and he did all of these.
And he got his Returnal review up.
And a Returnal review up. Khalif Adams, spawn on me. If you're not following right now, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Popping the biggest collars I have on a shirt ever.
It's a hell of a week. Congrats.
Yeah, it's been very busy.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like this is a valuable time to talk about, that's a lot of stress for someone to manage, Khalif.
Yeah.
That is a lot going on. You can get very overwhelmed very fast. Do either of you have experiences with therapy? That's our topic for this week.
Ooh.
Have you been to therapy?
I definitely do. Mine popped up in a couple of different ways, mostly through couples therapy, which is also really, really interesting because, well, today is my 9-year anniversary, which is also a part of the conversation.
It's just the most chill week of all time.
Yeah, it's you know what I'm saying.
No pressure.
No pressure
at all.
No pressure. Don't botch that one. Well, year 10 is the one that I'll definitely get looks if I'm working that day. But therapy was really, really interesting because at first I was against it. I was like, what do I need therapy for? I'm perfect. I don't need to figure out other things with myself. What other conversations do we need to have? But it was great because one, it opened me up to a lot of different ways of thinking about my, significant other and spouse. But also it made me own my ish when it came to the conversations of things that we were having discussions on where we weren't seeing eye to eye on conversations that we would have about the way that we were just hearing each other when we would have specific asks from each other, either behavioral changes or conversations around, being able to actually see and dig into the reasons why we were asking for not only behavioral changes, but for small asks of changing the way that we would do certain things. And it was just really interesting to see how important it was to go through the process. And I'll talk a little bit about one of the a little bit later in the show when it comes up in a good spot, but finding a therapist who could understand me as a human being, separate from our couples therapy sessions that happened and kind of probably saved our marriage, to be frank. Really gave me good language to be able to speak about my own feelings, the feelings I was having about our relationship, and the deficiencies that were in the space during that time. So therapy was fantastic. It was super, super good to be able to go to therapy and learn more about myself and how to speak, how to talk better about what I was thinking about and what I was feeling.
How about you, Greg?
I never have. No. And it's not by any stretch of the imagination that I think there's a stigma to it, nor do I think that I wouldn't get anything out of it. It's just never presented itself in a way that I've said, oh, I should go do that. And I don't know why. And that's why I think it's so interesting to be on this podcast today talking about it, because I know we're going to bring on two people who know so much about it because they do it, right? And it is that idea that I don't know. I hesitate to say what I'm about to say or what I was leading up to right there, right? It was like, I don't know if I'm doing it right. Like, I don't know. I feel like I don't think about going to therapy, and I don't know if that's because I feel like I talk so much, and I don't mean it I don't want to talk anymore. I mean that I feel like I already work through emotions in front of the camera every day. Like, that's one of the I don't know, charming factors of Greg Miller, I guess, or at least why people seem to like me, is that I own it all and I feel it and I put it all out there. And then, for the private stuff with, Jen and I, we're celebrating 4 years married on Saturday. And I've never had a partner like her, obviously. And I mean that in the way that, like, we're there for each other to have those kind of conversations. And of course, there's moments where emotions flare. And especially, in our relationship, English isn't her first language. And I think she speaks impeccable English, but she tells me all the time that in French, she has 27 ways to say this. And in English, she's limited to the 3 that she knows, right? And I don't feel that, but that does lead to occasions with us where we hit that wall, and we've worked through on our own, coming up with the tools of, all right, let's step back, let's stop. Clearly this has jumped a track. Like I'm more angry, you're more angry. There's something happening here that isn't what's supposed to happen. I shouldn't say supposed to, isn't what we want. This isn't the desired outcome, but our actions have led to it, and that's wrong. So let's take a moment, step away, step back in the conversation, and try to figure it out. But I also don't know, like, we're talking about is if I'm wrong about that, or if that's just, I don't know. And that's what I want to talk about today.
This is a great question to ask our first guest. It's a great time to introduce Dr. Watford, who is a teen and young adult psychologist with Kaiser Permanente. Wait for the 4 bucks to introduce her.
Here comes with the clouds.
Look at the little clouds come in.
There it is.
Hey.
We got Gary instead. It's fine. Gary's here.
Hey,
we can do that too. Hello, this is Gary.
Hi, Gary.
Bye, Gary.
Clouds come back in.
It's
everybody.
It's everybody.
You've got it.
Nice done.
So Gary is a Cloud9 performance psychologist with a fascinating background, and Dr. Watford, like we said, is a teen and young adult psychologist with Kaiser Permanente. We're going to throw this, just before we get into who you are, just throw that first question to you, Dr. Watford, if you're ready. Do you think Greg needs therapy? Or do you think that it's something that, like, even people who generally don't feel like they need therapy,
Google
would you
search
encourage
or
it?
Google image search before you answer the question.
Good evening, everyone. I am Latifah Watford. As introduced, I'm actually a psychiatrist, not a psychologist, so I'm an MD.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But as a psychiatrist, I do therapy. Do you need therapy? So I think choosing therapy is a very personal choice. I, of course, am biased. I think everybody should be in therapy. But what I did hear him say were some really healthy skills that we would teach in therapy, of being able to put that space between the emotions and be like, whoa, that didn't come out right, or we're going someplace different. Let's take a step back and really talk about, what we were trying to talk about, and not escalating things. And that's something we teach in therapy for people who don't have that skill. So it sounds like you are actually really in tune, particularly with your partner, of those kind of things. And when those things change, being able to say, wait a minute, let's take a step back. I'm not mad at you. I don't want you to be mad at me. Let's really discuss what's going on before this goes someplace where we can't, be able to discuss it in a healthy manner.
Well, there you go, Greg. You may be okay.
Well, I think, I think, what Doc's talking about is something that I think so important is that it is that I have those tools in my mental health toolbox, right? But it is also that thing of everybody needs therapy or everybody should look into therapy. Or for me, it's more about reading and listening to podcasts, which I know sounds goofy, but like, I feel like Death, Sex, and Money is such a learning experience every episode of a different experience that is wrestling with something incredibly deep. And so it's learning those tools. And then I also think that's where therapy comes in, where I'm sure if I went to therapy, I would find all sorts of new tools to use in these situations.
I feel like I should also just properly introduce Gary here.
Gary's here. The clouds coming.
The clouds showed up. It all happened. It's all very pretty. So Gary, you have a really fascinating background. I mean, you worked on U.S. Navy survival training, where basically you were helping literal United States military platforms as a performance psychologist. That seems very intense. What does that entail?
I actually, I've been at Cloud9 performance psych for just under 2 years, but I spent the bulk of my career in the U.S. Navy and the military. And the first kind of to ground yourself clinically, by trade, I'm a clinical psychologist. So the first 6 years was really working in hospital settings and, getting grounded in your clinical care, your direct patient care in hospitals and so forth. So the next 3/4 of my career essentially were in what you call embedded roles or operational roles. And embedded means instead of being outside that context, you're actually with them. So I was in survival training schools, teaching the psychology of captivity, counter-interrogation stuff. I was with the Marines, combat infantry Marines for 4 years. So when we rolled into Iraq, so I was actually with them. And then I've been with the SEALs. I ended up for the last 10 years, and I was the force psychologist for all the Navy SEALs globally. But what we're really working on is not teaching some didactic thing, but actually you're with them. So how do we mitigate stress in some of the really difficult places on Earth, and real high stakes environments? How do we develop, resilience and grit in those places? And also just, can we really pull on the value of community and interdependence? We call it tribe. So this idea that, hey, I owe each other. I owe the guy next to me or the gal next to me. Our lives are dependent on it. So you really figure out very quickly how to work as amazing teams and clearly as individuals. If you were running and you wouldn't want to let someone down, so you're going to typically perform better in that type of context. So we try to do those things in real time in those settings. So a lot of training, it's a little specialized at some point, but really valuable, sacred experiences in my life. So
how does that translate to what you do with Cloud9 today, obviously being an esports organization? I imagine that's very, very different, or are some of those skills actually that transferable?
So honestly, like the settings I just described, that's where I learned, honestly about, mental toughness, the power of challenge and mastery and so forth. And when you go to a place like Cloud9 or I'm a lousy gamer. I'm not a great, gamer at all, but I love performance. And I think performance is performance across many arenas.
Sure.
The issue though, you'd be foolish to think that they're the same domains. And so across domains, there's a lot of skill sets, right, that are required. And so you try to understand the skill set, you try to understand the individuals, what do they bring to the table? Like they're not Navy SEALs, right? But and also the culture, what's the expectation for people in terms of, and when you have that, then you have a pretty good basis to inform yourself on doing 4 areas I call assessment and then development and then optimization and then recovery. And to be honest, if you want to ask about a difference, maybe it's just the workouts. So maybe to be honest, Jack, the owner, so Jack gets out there and I think he competes like a Navy SEAL, so he keeps us on our toes in terms of our workouts. But there's more similarities than there are differences. Obviously, it's different domain. But I think that's been really fascinating and a challenge and fun to develop young lives, right? Not just in your domain of performance, but develop as people. And it's borne out true, better people make better performers. And so if you can grow them in their character and their discipline and their approaches, you'll help performance, but you help them feel like they're more identified with, I'm someone who does more because that's who I am, that type of thing. And you find that in your workouts and your nutrition and in the way that you try to sleep and so forth. So, but yeah, it's been a really great transition. A lot of interesting issues working with Cloud9 and e-gaming, esports in general. So
You think you're becoming a better gamer?
no, that hasn't worked. I mean, so
You've got time.
We're done at 6:30, and I thought there was another session. You're going to help me. That's what I was hoping for.
Exactly
This is what we can help you with. Yeah.
A little quid pro quo, like with the gamers. Like, I'm going to help you with arousal control. You're going to help me get the Baron, or you're going to help me in League or something. So
we can figure that out. Yeah,
I
you've
love
got
it.
the terms down though.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's happening. That's very exciting.
Yeah, I do have that, but that's all facade. So I'm terrible. So
You know just enough lingo to get through it. I understand.
Yeah.
exactly. Very true. Very true.
Well, obviously, a huge thanks to both of you for joining us today. We're going to jump into a fun game. Hopefully, we could get roasted here. We're going to go over therapy myths and themes, and we're going to do a little true or false. So I'm going to start first because this one pertains to me aggressively.
Okay.
If I just don't talk about any of my problems and instead I just bury myself in work, I will be fine. Is this true or false, Dr. Watford? Who'd have thought?
Absolutely false.
So what's the correct approach to something like that? That is what I always default want to do. When anything's wrong, I just want to work. I don't tend to want to talk about things. I tend to just want to be like, I'll be fine. It will be fine. I will figure it out. What are the negative impacts that my approach can have on me?
So it's kind of like if you're cooking something or boiling some water and you put the lid on and you keep all that heat in, eventually it's going to explode and the top's going to pop off. When you squash down emotions and feelings and thoughts, at some point they're coming back. And when they come back, they tend to be a bit more kind of explosive or more forceful than dealing with them each step along the way. The better way to do that is take the time and allow yourself to experience whatever it is you're experiencing. Feel whatever you're feeling. All your emotions are valid and you have the right to feel however you feel. The other part of that is not just experiencing what you're feeling, but also being aware and taking ownership of how you respond to those feelings. Because every time you have a bad day doesn't mean you have to be mad or grumpy about it. Sometimes bad things happen. It sucks. Life is not perfect. And sometimes when you have a bad day, that doesn't mean the rest of the world is going to give you that pass. Oh, she had a bad day. We're just going to let her sleep all day. You still got to keep moving. But that doesn't invalidate your feelings. It should just be, I'm having a really sucky day, but I got to keep pushing.
So you'd say that just even acknowledging that you're having a bad day is a good place to start.
Absolutely. And in acknowledging that, you also then give yourself a option or opportunity to change that, right? So you say, I'm really having a bad day. And that kind of triggers you. So what can I do to make it better? Maybe today it's really busy, but I've got 30 minutes. I'm going to have ice cream in that 30 minutes. And that's something to look forward to. Or I'm going to play with my friends outside, or I'm going to play an extra 45 minutes, hour tonight on the games, or whatever it is that kind of helps you feel better. When you're having that bad day, sometimes if you acknowledge it and then say, what can I do to kind of counteract it, to give me something to look forward to for the rest of the day, that does put you in a better mood. And then your day goes smooth.
That's fair. Gary, how about you? How do you approach this, especially when it comes to esports players who do work in a pretty high stress environment? If any of them has had a bad day and it's a competition day, what's the advice for them to deal with that extra potential personal stress in their personal lives when they're actually competing?
Well, I think there's a time for things. And what you described, Alana, was really the idea of kind of being able to compartmentalization, the ability to say, I'm going to keep grinding away and work. And I think people do that all the time, and I can use the SEALs, the Marines, the esports, and that, that's a coping mechanism. I agree with what Dr. Watford was talking about in terms of awareness, but I think there's a time as well. And recognize that compartmenting or just staying focused on what you're doing, you're saying, I'm just going to grind harder. That's a definite coping mechanism, but sometimes people do that in certain areas of their life, and then it's going to affect other areas. And so when you start to, usually what happens is you'll start to bleed into other areas and you'll go, oh wow, that I see that, and then you think that's the issue, but really, it's some of your coping mechanisms. I really honestly, we talk about working harder versus working smarter, and it's not about you're not bright, intelligent, smart. It's about I want to work hard, but I want to work with awareness, and I think that's what Dr. Wofford's talking about. With the players, we just basically we try to think about the time, and we try to put it in a performance metric or performance rubric. So instead of just I'm so frustrated, I'm so mad, we talk about a little bit about behaviors, about thoughts, about moods, and really in retrospect, when we can apply it towards the game, they also can then apply that to other areas of their life, because I think that's a more indirect way to kind of approach some of their own issues, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah. Greg, do you want to take the next one?
Well, I have a question before I ask the next myth. All right.
That's
And Gary, Dr. Watford, whoever wants to. I'll go to Dr. Watford. Why? And it kind of makes sense when you say it, but I don't understand the actual psychology, the brain behind it of why does talking to someone about your problem generally make your problem not a big deal. I think about it, myself. If I'm wrestling with something, I'm stressed out about my day, all these things are going on, or I'm upset with somebody else, and I'm in my head about stewing on it. There's that small voice that'll tell you, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Or, oh, you're overthinking this, yada, yada, yada. But eventually it runs away. But it seems like when I do go up and I talk to my wife and I express what I'm going through, and you're talking about the emotions I'm feeling are valid, when I express them, immediately, at least some of the weight lifts from your shoulders. Why is that?
So I think there's a couple of different things that lead to that. One is you're right. A lot of times we get in our heads, right? And you're having all these running thoughts and conversations in your head, and it's really hard to sort through them when they're in your head. Just the action of being able to spill them to somebody and talk to them actually helps you organize and think through the thoughts that you're thinking more concisely and more effectively. The other thing is in therapy, you create a safe space where you can go and you can talk to somebody where you won't be judged, where it's not critical. It's an outside person who really doesn't have, any wins to get from learning your personal information or anything other than being a sounding board. And sometimes in our lives, it's very easy to have people around us who we talk to, but they are not as objective as somebody else, like your therapist, who can then come from a different angle and say, really? So when I hear you say this is what I think I'm hearing. And it makes you rethink, well, wait a minute, is that really what I meant? Or maybe I'm not framing it in the right way, or maybe I should be thinking about it differently. So I think for one part of it, it's definitely helpful sometimes just to get all the thoughts out. Because when you're thinking about 50 things at one time, you can't concentrate on all 50 of them. So getting them out and hearing them sometimes also is like, that's kind of weird. I don't know why I was thinking that. And that really helps. But the advantage of having a therapist or some kind of objective body there is that they then can kind of reflect back to what you're saying to them and try to help you build understanding as they build understanding, and then really give you objective kind of feedback about what you're saying.
It is so good.
I was gonna say, Khalif, you're nodding over there like a bobblehead. Is this what you found in therapy?
Oh my God, it's so good because you just figure out how much nonsense you're saying and how much it's not really coming through to the other person. The what I heard you say is a thing now that we use so much in our relationship now when we're having arguments, is because we were in therapy sessions together, and I would say a thing that I would swear that she was just like filtering through and pulling in and vice versa. And we were saying completely different things in terms of what we were trying to convey, what the underlying needs were that came from those statements, what the conversation was. And we were like literal ships in the night, missing each other in terms of conversations that we were having and things we were trying to say. And that third party would not only refilter that stuff out into a way that we could both listen to, comprehend, refilter for ourselves, and say, okay, what am I doing in this particular moment that is causing these extra layers of chaff or stress or any of that kind of stuff? But they would then also reframe the conversation for us in a way that, you know, if a really good therapist, in a way that you can directly hear, which was really good for us, because I was just like, you know, it was we're very different folks anyway. We're very country mouse, city mouse when it comes to a lot of the stuff. So it wound up being it was like cultural bits that were laid in there. There were conversational bits that were there. And it was so good to just have someone else kind of just like take the ball and say, well, no, this is not what you said, but this is what you meant. Now try to go from that position and try to find a common ground there. It's so good.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for answering my question, everybody. I'll give you your myth now, Gary. Is this true or false? All right, people need to see a therapist weekly to see improvement.
No, I can't speak to the periodicity, but I'll speak to the principle. And the principle is that, you know, change is really hard, and there's a lot of ambivalence in change. And if you even think about habits as change, habits are things that have pretty strong neural pathways, and you begin to make different behaviors. It's kind of like going through the woods and you're creating a new path. And so as you go through more and more, you create a smoother and a faster path. And that's an oversimplification, but it's really about change, and change is hard, and change is also scary, and change requires trust. Where do you get those things if you're just kind of sporadically talking to someone? You need to be in a trusted, competent relationship that actually helps you in your change. And I think that I think some type of continuity is really important, whatever kind of works for you and so forth. And you really want to think about momentum. So that those are, you know, I don't know if it's weekly, but those are things that I would hope for. I see a lot of people, and sometimes it's bi-weekly or weekly, or sometimes it's every third day, or it just depends. Sometimes they're just check-ins. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's the stuff that when I think of how important it is to kind of dig into those conversations in that way, and how just they are so wildly different depending upon who that conversation is. I'm going to go a little bit off script and not ask a myth question, but I wanted to ask Dr. Watford, when there's a huge difference in the way that you're kind of dealing with the conversations around teens and young adults, as opposed to, you know, grown folk, as my grandma used to like to call them. What's the biggest difference when usually a lot of young adults and children aren't taught to give themselves space to be able to have those emotions, you know, publicly or externally, because their parents are kind of like, you know, I'm your parent. I tell you how to feel. I tell you what to do. This is what it winds up being in my household. What's the kind of conversations there when you're having those conversations with young adults and teens in that way?
So you're right. There is some differences. There's also a lot of similarities. I think that when people come to see a psychiatrist or a therapist, whether they're teens or adults, there is usually some apprehension there. Like, they don't know what to expect. They don't know who's going to talk to who. So a lot of it starts with just kind of being very frank and clear in what we're doing here. For young adolescents and young adults, there's some developmental things that are going on too. So you're right. A lot of kids not only aren't necessarily supported in saying, yes, feel what you feel, but they also don't have the developmental skills to be able to identify their emotions and then understand, when I feel this way, it may make me act this way. They're just not, their brain has not reached that level of development yet, even in young teens and mid-teens. So a lot of that interaction is kind of explaining. And sometimes it's as simple as we have a chart that has different faces on it that show different emotions. 9 times out of 10, when we start seeing, particularly our younger adolescents, when they describe how you feel, I get good, okay, mad, sleepy, or happy. Like, that's it. There are way more emotions in the human kind of emotional scale than that. So the first thing you have to do is kind of check in and say, you know, what are your understanding of your emotions? And then help them name them, whether it be showing them a picture so they understand, or developing even their own cues and language around, when you feel this, how do you feel? Well, let's call that mad, or let's call that angry. And what's the difference between those? So that's some of the kind of groundwork, particularly with adolescents, that you have to do in therapy to get them to identify their feelings, they first need to know what they are in the first place. Then we have to work on, so I hear you saying every time you lose a game, you do this. Well, what feeling are you having when you do this? Well, isn't that interesting? At school, when this happens, do you have this feeling? So you kind of draw a map like, oh, wow, every time I get frustrated, I throw things. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Is that really how you want to express it? Let's learn a different way to express your emotions. Because again, it's paramount that you A, understand your emotions, B, acknowledge it, but C, feel it. It's okay. There's no invalid emotion. Where we get into problems is where you respond to those emotions and how you react to them. So we kind of help put names to them, understand what they're feeling, and then connect. When you feel this way, this is what you're doing. So it's not that the emotion is bad. It's maybe your response isn't the best. Perhaps you shouldn't throw things. We'll get you in trouble all throughout your life. Let's find something else that you can do to express that emotion in a healthy way. Adults, usually they've got the developmental skills to understand what their emotions are and expressing them, but making that connection for them also is key. But also sometimes, even as adults, we grow up in a culture where emotions and wearing your emotions on your sleeve or being emotional and expressing emotions, especially for males, is not always something that is encouraged. So in therapy and in treatment, you have to create a space where not only is it encouraged, it's empowered, and also lead them to start believing that, wow, when I do this, I feel better and I'm actually behaving better. My relationships are better. And so that they learn that owning, acknowledging, and appropriately responding to my emotions is not a weakness. It's actually my strength.
So would you say, like, I've never thought about it. No one's ever laid that out to me that explicitly, and this entire live stream is me realizing how comparatively easy our jobs are compared to yours. I'm like, wow, everything I do is so simple. But I guess I would have, and because I've never thought about this, if someone comes to you and they have a temper, for example, your goal is to not try to get rid of their temper. It's to try to teach them how to more healthily deal with that emotion.
Absolutely. So again, feeling your emotions is normal. We are humans. That is one of the core things of being human. We are emotional creatures at our core. So it's not bad to feel an emotion. I have never met anybody who has never been angry. And if I did, I'd be really scared of them. But that doesn't mean that everybody I've met who's angry is going around beating up people either, right? So yes, it's okay to be angry. Yes, it's okay to be frustrated. But the difference is when you feel those feelings, acknowledge them, know that it's there, but how do you respond to them? Because as an adult, you have responsibilities. You can't get angry and curse at your boss. Well, you probably need a paycheck and a place to live. So let's reframe that. Yes, you're angry. How do you express that healthily? How do you get that out so it doesn't damage relationships or your job or other life situations? So it's always important. And I think validation of somebody's feelings and what you're saying is key in therapy, not only because we need to teach you those skills, but it also builds a relationship. It helps you kind of realize, okay, they get me. So maybe what I'm saying isn't completely crocked. Maybe I should listen and try some things out. But it's really more about behavioral management and modification in response to your emotions, rather than you should never feel that. That's bad. It's a bad emotion. You don't do that, because there is no bad emotion. An emotion is a feeling. All feelings happen.
If I can, I want to ask a question here to Gary based on Dr. Watford there. Something you just said, Dr. Watford, that I thought was really powerful, right? Is the idea of not only being able to express the emotion, but be able to express it to another party, right? And not have it go into a nuclear situation, which is a skill unto itself, right? Of processing your own emotion, not saying something in the heat of the moment, and not going into an even bigger complication or argument. Gary, is that something you see and help the Cloud9 people with? Because I'm really fascinated. We're talking about, obviously, mental health therapy, all this stuff, but for you to be on the Cloud9 team, right? I imagine that's got to be part of it. Because I know how many times I've worked with somebody and gotten mad at them and I shoot my mouth off. And it's like, well, eventually we won't work together. But as a team, you've got to not only work together, play together, do all these things together. Is that kind of what you're doing?
Yeah, I think I'll hit that a few different ways.
Please.
So, you know, I think Dr. Wofford's the comments about, is it problematic to be frustrated, irritated, angry? No, I mean, you are. What are you going to say? I'm not, and you are. So really, it's an idea of being really direct, and candid and self-aware, and having the ability to accept that's what I'm at. I think that we talk. To be honest, this ecosystem, this culture is more passive than the one that I've been from in the military, the Marines,
Sure.
and that, right. And passive isn't bad. It just means that I'm kind of concerned about being really direct with you. So I'll be sort of passive, or I'll be more aggressive, and I'll, and assertive is in the middle. Just that ability to kind of say, I care about what I think, I care about what you think, and to have that mutual respect for self-awareness for yourself and for the other person is really important. And I think that's a way to say, hey, I care enough about you to be direct, to be candid. And yeah, I care about you, but this, when you do that, that's a foul ball. That's not okay. That type of deal. We can disagree, but at least we're going to talk about it, because I'm not going to, just be passive and then bring it up in some other setting or something. But, we bring up the idea of tilt sometimes, right? And being tilt, and I don't know if that's a segue a little bit into this, but I think that tilt is this name of something happens to me, and then I get tilted, and then wasn't my fault. I just got tilted. And like, no, did you know these games are designed to they have such a high ceiling that they're supposed to frustrate you. You're supposed to be irritated. You're supposed, because you can't master them, but you want to master, and there's reward when you get mastery, right? That feels good. So it's frustrating. So what? That's fine. Let's be frustrated, but let's also realize that something didn't come over me. It's actually, I'm either too focused in the past, so my self-talk, if you will, my awareness is, hey, I'm too worried about that team fight we had that we lost, or I'm too future focused, and I'm always thinking about, oh, this game's over. What does it matter? And so then I don't play in the present. I'm not direct. I'm not clear with myself or with my teammates. And tilt is really this idea of I'm out of control. I mean, I'm not focused in my present. I'm not thinking, now what? Next step. That's what toughness is. That's resilience. That's what directness is all about. So managing your emotions, you can do a lot in learning, even in performance. And that's what I try to, that's sort of the idea of dealing with stigma and dealing with, just try to approach it in a human way versus
Sure.
you're broken. This is a growth model. So.
Gary, what would you say are some of the most common things that you have to help players with, or the most common mental health and wellness issues that you have to address where C9 is concerned? Obviously, esports is a really competitive environment. I don't think I've ever been in an environment that's that competitive professionally. Like, what are some of the common things you deal with, and how do you deal with them?
So, what's interesting is that we talked about some really tough environments with the SEALs, the Marines, the, survival training, being in prison or war. I've been there. These guys actually have, they work as hard at their craft as any place I've ever been. They really work hard and they work long. And so it's not so much that I'm just there to deal with all the mental health things, but think about the human. I mean, I am, but think about the human condition too. They work 12 hours a day. Starting, we work out at 10. We have meals. We then start scrimming at 12, and we work pretty much through midnight. And if you think about that compounded through COVID, what's a natural conclusion? You're going to get burned out, right?
Yep.
And it's super cognitive expenditure to do this game. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'd be exhausted just playing it all the time. And so if you think about that, you think about all the restrictions on their schedule. We try to say, hey, let's try to find some autonomy. What's some choice? What's some places you can exert yourself and say, this is my time? Or do you have other interests? Do you have connections with somebody else other than the five of us, right? So that's not exactly a mental health problem. That's an obvious thing that's sitting there. And so you want to address those things. I work with some of them one-to-one, but at that level, they've done a pretty good job, to answer your point about, working with arousal control, about working through some of the behavioral and the emotional. It doesn't mean they're paragons of behavior and emotion. It just means that they've done a good job to craft it to their craft. So we focus a lot on think about the team performance and on the comms that you have with each other, and think about the ways that you can be more passive or more direct and grow as a man, or if it's a woman, grow as a woman in the sport. And we think about, the way that you work out together, you sleep, you eat, your nutrition, your the way you take care of. So that there's a lot of ways to inject wellness as opposed to a mental health focus, even though you're working on someone who's mentally calibrated and better to approach their life. And so in scrim reviews, we don't just talk about, in hindsight, I should have done that. It's like, no, what were you thinking in real time when you made that decision? What data inputs were you incorporating? Who was calming, who was not? And so you're trying to grow the sense of team, not just performance, but the sense of being better people, being better teammates. And I could go on and on, but I think that gets to the point a little bit.
Did you want to follow up with a question, Greg or Khalif? Otherwise, I have plenty I could go through. I'm so curious about so much of this.
I'm curious to hear, the conversation around, like, are you? I know, Dr. Wofford, you've talked about playing games with your children and how that's kind of informed you in a different way around, the things that they're kind of seeing in the space, because there are. I'm sure different challenges within that demographic, within that age group that, again, we don't necessarily see, or we do see kind of in different ways in kind of an adult. What are some of the things you're pulling back from? We talked about a little pre-show about how you've played games and how you are a gamer, an old school gamer. So I'm putting my fist up with you. And how that's kind of informed, the way that you're thinking about, the current game space and how that affects the youth of today in that way too.
So I think that it's very interesting that you asked that, because I was actually kind of thinking about how am I a different mom, and even pre-COVID and now post-COVID, how I have changed drastically. Particularly when it comes to gaming and online social media and all that kind of thing, because the world changed and I can't control that. So yes, I am an old school gamer chick. I had an Atari and a Sega Genesis and went to arcades and stood in line and all of that. And I miss some of that, honestly. Yeah. So I've been trying to catch up with the new things. So my sons are teaching me how to play Minecraft, and
nice.
I have a Fortnite lesson that's yet to be scheduled.
Very good.
So, I'm trying to keep up and kind of, be in their world, because what I have admittedly begrudgingly accepted is that this is now how their world is, right? For when I was growing up, I'm going to date myself a little bit because I grew up last century. But when I was growing up, gaming was a thing you did, but there was not this connectedness that we have now. It wasn't necessarily a full culture or a lifestyle. It was like a toy that you played with and you did. What I have seen transition over my lifetime thus far is that gaming has gone from some just kind of entertainment thing to actually a full-on culture and a way of life and lifestyle for a generations now. So what I see with my kids is things that I didn't understand, particularly pre-COVID, now with, them being stuck at home and not being able to talk to their friends in real life, and now being on screen 40,000 hours every day. Because, as a mom, as a doctor, we're like, no, you can only have so much screen time. You got to. Now I'm realizing we have to really relax those and really take a look at it, because in today's world, cutting screen time means I'm socially isolating my kids. Like I'm pulling them away from their friends, whether those friends live around the corner or live in another country. Those are their friends. Those are their social connections. So I had to sit back and realize, wow, I can't. Can I allow you to be on games until 12 o'clock and you go to bed at 10? No. But at the same token, I'm much more understanding about this is the way that you guys socialize. This is how you connect. And that's important. You need that. You need that support, especially now. The world is absolutely bonkers. So that's one thing I've definitely realized. What I've also realized is something that Gary brought up was like, these games are made to make you mad. It's almost like an internal thing to make you mad, to push you to play on, to do more. So I was like, the first one I played, I was like, I want to throw this remote. I can't do this. There's too many buttons. I'm yelling at the TV. I'm getting all upset. My kids are looking at me like, yeah, you know. I was like, huh. It's not just you being kids. This is like really when you're in it and when you're doing it, it is so real. Like it triggers all those real emotions. So before the experience, I can say, I was just like, oh my gosh, stop yelling at the TV. Just stop. Now I'm like, huh, I get it. So now my approach is when my sons are playing and they get escalated, it's no more yelling down the stairs or yelling at them. It's, hey, you know what? You're escalating. I think you need to take a break. Not get off, not shut it down. I want you to take 5-10 minutes, just walk around.
That's really smart.
And then you can come back. Because I realized that it's not just them irrationally responding just all crazy. It's like there are true triggers. This is their life now. These people are important to them because this is their social group. They want to do good in these games because that's the whole drive of the game is to beat it. So when you get, particularly when they get to those stages where they're stuck, oh my gosh, we have to have a whole what is the problem? I can't get past the problem. Did you call your brother? Call your brother and ask him. Or did you talk to Hayden, your best friend? Reach out, figure out how to do this because you are getting all emotional about this. So it's really important to you, but I need you to figure out how to solve it because even though I get it, that doesn't mean I'm going to allow you just to be all irrational and use all these bad coping skills and yelling and cursing and throwing things because you're frustrated. You're still going to have to use your coping skills. But now I recognize some of those coping skills are going to have to be game and social media based. It's no longer just go outside or go ride your bike or turn it off. It's I need you to engage in that culture, in that community, because I need you to learn when you're in that community how to better respond in those frustrating situations.
You sound like a great mom.
Yeah.
No doubt.
This sounds excellent.
No doubt.
Well, that's right. I don't think my kids do that every day.
If I can ask one question as a follow-up to that I wonder. I don't have children. And so my question would be to you, Dr. Watford, as you listen in and get this like inside approach to what's going on in your kids' lives, since you're all locked down, COVID, you have to be there and you hear them playing games and stuff. Are kids today, and God, do I feel old saying that, are kids today more aware and open to sharing their emotions? I think back to when I was a little boy, right? And it was, oh man, if you started crying on the playground, like what a sissy you were, and blah 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 blah. Like I think as I got older, even like I remember, hugging my best friend when we were our final night before I went to college, and just hugging him goodbye, and he'd be like, oh, and I was like, really? And like, is that still the case? Is it getting better? I mean, are all the conversations that are happening with mental health being more open, helping at all in that stage?
So first, let me say that I probably have a very skewed view, right? Because I am a psychiatrist. I'm huge on stomping out the stigma. So this is kind of my life passion. So I've seen great changes from when I started sometime last century or so, and now, and just how mental health is addressed and accepted and dealt with and viewed. We still have a lot of work to do, but I'm very excited about those changes. The other thing is that as a psychiatrist, the way I view and raise my kids and do all that is totally shaped because of what I do, right? So of course, my kids are like, I'm like, oh, how are you feeling? From the time they were little. At 2 or 3, we would be like, no, that's not bad. I understand you're frustrated, but you can't have a cookie right now. So we use emotional words with them. So they're aware. But what I do see is even like my oldest is in college now. And so when I talk to him, I do get that he is very emotionally aware and astute and very good at kind of doing that. But his peer group, who I didn't raise, also had those skills. So I think it is growing. I think it is becoming more acceptable to feel how you feel and express it, which is great. I do remember like the transition as the kids grow up, when they're really little, they want you to hug and kiss them. And then round about middle school, they're like, drop me off 6 blocks away. Nobody needs to know you're my mom. No, you can't hug me. No, you can't kiss me. So I remember those days, particularly I have 5 brothers. So I remember that growing up, but with my kids, and again, it may be a bias because their mom's a psychiatrist, but fortunately we never really went through that stage. Like I dropped my kids off at school. They're like, bye mom, I love you. And all of that, which makes me feel great. But when I'm looking at other parents and other kids getting out their cars, I see the same thing. So I think you're right. I think there has been a kind of emotional, slow, very, very slow emotional awakening in our country that has made it more acceptable. It may not be like frontline, everybody should do it kind of thing, but it's there. And if you do it, it's no longer one of those things that people are looking at you like, what are you doing? They're just like, eh. So it's becoming more acceptable.
We did have a really good question from the chat that I just wanted to read out. This is from Cav723, who said, just now joining, as someone who lost full-time employment back in October, what free resources are there for someone suffering from PDD/MDD and general anxiety? So we do have a great resource, findyourwords.org. Definitely go there and check that out. That includes a video that I helped work on, but it is a great free resource, in part talking about depression awareness. There are plenty of online sources, but I was wondering if either of you have anything that you recommend. Gary, is there anything that you know of that's like a free way outside of talking to friends, I suppose, for people to really manage their mental health?
I think that, well, I would definitely double tap echo what you're saying about the findyourwords.org and so forth, and finding resourcing. I don't know where the person lives, but there's, in every place, there's always some type of community mental health, some type of place that you can certainly go that's funded, and there's sliding scales and so forth. If it's less or more, it just depends. But I would just say, I would tell you that half the battle right there is just being able to say, this is going on for me. This is difficult. It takes a lot of courage, a lot of integrity to be able to say, man, I've been doing great in my life, and sometimes I'm not. This is one of those seasons I'm not, and I want to be great. I want to do better, and to really reach out, and that's really half the battle. Most people will sit for long periods of time, especially people who are performance oriented, before they really get help. And one last thing, and I'm sorry, this isn't a resource, but it's a comment. And boy, therapy isn't the answer for everything. I hate to say that as a psychologist. I mean, there's the ability to network, the ability to connect, but I would say this: therapy really needs to be seen as a growth model, not a broken model. And the reason you can talk about your emotions and stuff isn't because that's where I'm staying. It's because that's human. That's who I am. And this is where I want to go. And when you have that ability to be self-aware and acknowledge that takes integrity, without flinching at yourself, and then do that, that's a monster step to growth, not to being broken, but to move forward. And I think that's really applicable with Cloud9. If that was a question, is really trying to look at things in performance and growth models instead of brokenness. We all find out we're dealing with the same kind of stuff, and you hear that in therapy, you hear that as a psychologist, as a doctor myself, and doing that, I just like, wow, the universality is pretty amazing.
Dr. Watford, do you have any free advice for people looking for help?
Yes, so I echo what Gary says. One of my main things that I always try to relate to my patients when I see them is, you're not here because something's wrong with you, and you're not broken, you're not a bad person. You just need to learn some skills. And so the goal is to always kind of externalize that stuff, so people don't go home and be like, I'm a bad person because I get mad, or I'm a bad person because I respond this way. No, you're not a bad person. There's nothing with you that needs to be fixed as a person. It's just your responses. It's just how you do things. It's kind of like you throw things too hard this way, so let's change up and try to throw it a different way, and learning a different skills around that. I always try to make sure my patients understand, from my point of view, you are perfectly imperfect. What you need is some skills. What you need is, you need to learn how to do this better. So you're not broken, and we're not fixing you. We're just, we're training your performance. We're growing you. For free resources, Gary's absolutely right. Every county in every state has a community health service department, and they're called different things depending on where you are. You can always Google them. They do free sliding scales. There are a lot of support groups that are based online now. You can Google those. There's like grief support. There's loss, whether it be death or losing relationship kind of support. So there are a lot of support groups available online that to help people out, and those are free as well. There are also community resources you can always check. There are a lot of the hospitals, just regular medical hospitals, have chaplains or other mental health people who work there who can give you resources, who can point you to groups and support groups to get you the support that you need. Your regular physician, your primary care physician, is also an excellent resource because they're connected to the community and tapped in, so they can give you resources as well. There are some great apps out there. Calm app is fabulous. Headspace is great. So we're getting to a point in our world where there's a lot of stuff out there that you can use to kind of help you get started on that kind of journey. And Gary's right. Therapy is not a fix-all. If it was, we would all be in therapy. We would all be perfect. Everything would be great. But it's not a fix-all, and sometimes it's not enough for everybody. But that doesn't mean that it can't be helpful. It also doesn't mean that I think that a lot of people come into it with that kind of TV view of therapy, right? I'm going to go talk to somebody every week for 6 weeks, and my life is going to be perfect. It's going to be great. But therapy is work. It's a lot of work. And it takes commitment to yourself that you want to do things differently and be better to continue that work. And like Gary pointed out, change is hard. And therapy is really a change vehicle for people. And so you have to understand that going in because, one, there is no perfect. Two, you could go through therapy, resolve whatever happened, and then COVID comes. And what do? Because this is a new thing. So you may have to go back and re-up on some coping skills or that kind of thing. That doesn't mean it failed. It means that you need some more growth. For sure. You have to change some more. So I think it's important that people understand that it's a progress. You grow in stages and you grow in progress, and it takes work. It takes dedication to yourself, which I think is really important. I think that engaging in treatment, whether it be therapy or psychiatric medications or whatever, I really commend people because that means that you are engaged in making you better, and you're going to do the work to make you better. And that's what we're here for. We want you to be the best you can be, whatever that looks like to you. And the fact that you are committing yourself to engage in whatever it takes to get there, like the person who posted in the chat, is really commendable. That is a huge first step, and it's really, kind of monumental in getting into that space of, okay, I need help, which is really hard for grown-ups to say, right? Yep. Like, who among us is always like, help me. We internally think we should be able to do it all ourselves. So getting to the space where you're like, I don't know what to do and I need help is great. And it's to be celebrated and supported.
I love that.
Yeah, we did get another question here. Honestly, we're almost out of time, and I feel like I could talk to the two of you about this forever. I have really more things that I want to say. But I'm trying to get through a couple of questions from the chat, and I thought this one was interesting that I think would apply to both of you. This is from Stride Pack, who said, do you have any advice for school staff or parents who want to help with students who are potentially using gaming to avoid responsibilities, which I still think would probably apply to the C9 team for you, Gary, is like people who are using gaming or hobbies to avoid other things. And I think that's really a question about time management. So to frame it for you, Gary, how do you deal with, players in very competitive environments trying to, I'm not sure that it even would happen in esports because it is so competitive, but trying to find escapes that aren't necessarily healthy.
That's not as germane to probably, Cloud9. They're paid professionals. They're all, that's the fiduciary thing they're responsible for. So that's what they do as professionals. So, but the idea that's brought up is so important because I think not just gaming is meant to be compelling because it's meant to have a high ceiling. It's meant to be hard. It's meant to not be easily masterable. And I kind of would love to do that instead of doing things like, to be a man and to grow in this area or to grow in my relationship. That's hard. And sometimes this is more compelling. But I would tell you that just like anything we do to kind of get off the path of growth and learning, it's a real nice short-term thing. I'm not saying it doesn't feel great, but I think we have to really pull that in balance. We can do that with anything. I could be a runner and I want to run all the time, and that's a healthy thing to do. But I may run in a way that is just completely to leave and not feel or not think. We talked about that earlier about being compartmented. I think Alana, you were talking about that. There's a season for things, but I would just encourage people to really think about, and especially callers or the crowd, think about it's not terrible to use things as a relief, a stress relief. It's when it becomes a pattern where it really becomes problematic to the other areas of my life. And if we have friends and if we're spouses or whoever, or significant others, and they say, hey, you're neglecting these areas, hopefully we'd have the humility, the beginner's mind, which is really the idea of, I'm curious about my life. I'm not just trying to just say I know this or that and be an expert. When you have those types of things, then you really honestly can look at things in a balanced way and say the gaming equips me for this, but it doesn't equip me for that. So that's be the best way I could put it.
That was great.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to have input on that. I am a board member on a organization called Checkpoint, run by Jennifer Hazel, that is specifically about the relationship between mental health and video games. And there are a lot of things that video games can really help with
Yes.
when it comes to mental health. There are games that you can play that will make you feel very calm. Minecraft is often used as a really good example in creative mode for a game that we recommend for anyone who's dealing with anxiety. But also a lot of games like Journey, Flower, like a lot of Abzu, just like very pretty shorter experiences that can genuinely really help people. And there are a lot of studies behind this kind of stuff too. But not only that, like video games in some cases can help with reflexes, can help with empathy. And I think that's one of the things that I always find to be the most interesting is that if you're playing a game and you're in the shoes of someone who is potentially doing something bad, it helps you understand other people who might do those actions and the impact that it can actually have, because you're not just passively watching a movie or a TV show where you're just seeing something on a screen. You're actually kind of experiencing it. So there are so many benefits to playing video games as well. To the person who asked that question, like, I'm not going to tell you that you should use anything to avoid your responsibilities, but there are a lot of benefits to playing video games where both mental health and development processes are concerned. Dr. Watford, do you know anything about that?
Actually, yes. Interestingly, there has been for years now the use of some video games actually in residency and in training medical students to help.
Trauma center, right? It's got to be trauma center.
It is a great. And so I think there are actually some specific ones just for medical school as well to help with hand-eye acuity, which if you're a surgeon, you got to have that good hand-eye acuity. Those kind of things, actually, those skills are sharpened using those games. When it comes to schooling games, as a psychiatrist, so there's two roles. There's a mom and then there's a doctor. As a doctor, I always we have to create balance, right? You can't expect a kid to be all one thing. You have to balance it out. So you have to really kind of do time management for them until they get that skill. So you're right. It is about time management, some part. Some part when they get older, it is an avoidance thing. I don't want to be here in school. I hate history. I'm going to play my game because I hate history. Or I don't like the way the teacher talks. I can't pay attention. It's boring, whatever. So I want to do something more fun. And so in those situations, kind of the merging of the mom and the doctor, my recommendation is, and my stance has always been, for people in school is your full-time job. That is what you do. That is what your responsibility is. And you have responsibilities connected to school, meaning you've got to pay attention, you've got to do the work, etc. Now, playing games absolutely is your social time. You can have that. And so if it gets really to a space where they're doing everything except school, that's when you start having to do some behavior modification things. And so behavior modification is not about taking away things. It's about allowing people to earn things. So getting prizes. So for example, if you have, say, a sixth grader who never pays attention in math and you go online and you're like, so math is from 2 to 3, and I see you've been playing from 1:30 to 4. That's a problem. So every day that you don't play from 2 to 3, or every day you don't play during this time period, you earn X amount of extra time. So then they're incentivized to do what they're supposed to do because at the end they get something they want. But you're right, it is about time management, but there's also some avoidance in there. And I think in this new chaotic COVID school thing that we're doing, we're seeing a lot more of that, a lot more of disconnect from the kids, which makes sense. They're sitting at home in the same room for 8 hours on a screen, looking at the same thing. I'd want to be distracted too.
Fair enough.
Yes.
All right, I could. Oh, go ahead.
No, I just should have mentioned there's a doctor, Jane McGonigal, who's you can Google her, but she does a lot about the ability of games to help with something called neuroplasticity, which is just, as she said, injuries that she talks about cognitive injuries and trauma, and then you realize that gaming has been a great vehicle, great platform to help develop new neural pathways, new mental acuities. It's not a panacea for it, but she does a really artful job of describing some of those things and then putting them in their right place. So I just want to mention her as well.
That's awesome. I didn't know that, so I will absolutely look into that.
Yeah, that's super cool.
I would love to keep you for longer, but you've taken up enough of your time. Had so many topics that we could have gotten through here, but
so many things.
we ran out of time. Thank you so much for joining us, to both Gary and Dr. Watford. We really appreciate you being here. I wanted to ask if, before we close out, if there's any other notes that you have about therapy specifically, or just the stigma in general, any closing comments that you wanted to leave us with.
I might comment just real quick, therapy in general, and the stigma that we talk about. The term like FOPO, right? Fear of other people's opinions and so forth. And it's a very real phenomenon. It's very, it's a survival mechanism. I mean, can you imagine being outside of the tribe? You're worried about what other people think about in old times, and that's a real problem if you're not within that safety protective unit. So it makes sense, but we have this army of behavioral scientists and people that are always convincing us on social media that it is life and death if you don't wear these things or be associated with that group or be liked or be something. And it just creates a lot more focus on what everyone thinks. And I want people that care about what I think or like me or all that stuff. But it puts so much extra focus that really takes away from the authenticity of your life pursuit or from thwarting your goals. And I'm like, I just think that if you don't label something and call it what it is, it's not terrible. It's not always great for you. And you have to be able to say, is that really life or death? Or is this something I need to do what I need to do anyway? And like I talked about, there's a lot of courage, a lot of integrity, a lot of honor as a person to say, hey, I gotta take care of business because that's the path that I'm on. And I really respect that in people, and a lot of humility just talking about that, because that's a hard thing. But when we can just get past that and get into help, and it's not the talking in therapy, it's actually that you get to focus on who you are, what your experiences are, what your context is. I mean, Khalif did a great job of describing that, and then you get to unflinchingly look at yourself. That's a powerful place, and that's a good thing. And I just encourage people that who are in that place to pursue that.
Thank you. That's awesome. How about you, Dr. Watford?
So I'm huge on eliminating stigma. I think that we still have a lot of work to do, but we've come a long way. Mental illness is not because you're a bad person. It's not because you did something bad or wrong and it got done to you. It is a medical illness with physical and neurological basis. And I also strongly encourage people to understand that sometimes the scariest thing you have to do is that first step. And sometimes you just have to take that first step out there on faith and know that if I'm seeking to do better and be better, and I'm reaching out to people to do that, that I then have to be able to trust myself enough to take that step. Living in a place of fear is not a way to live. So don't let fear of what people are thinking about you or fear of what others may say about you because you are going to therapy or anything. Don't let other people's fear or your fear of those things stop you from trying to be the best you.
Yeah. Well said.
Good advice all around.
I love it.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Well, we are out of time. Thank you to everyone for joining us, and for everyone who watched live. We appreciate you. For anyone who didn't know, Presence of Mind is basically the first of its kind. It's a partnership between a healthcare provider and a top esports organization, which combines Kaiser Permanente's expertise in mental health and wellness with Cloud9's deep commitment to their players and fan base. We do also have a giveaway that is running that I think we have like a little card we can show up on screen for. if you want to show that.
The clouds are coming. I can feel it. The clouds
It's
are
all come
coming.
through. We love the cloud animation. But first up, basically, the first step in improving your total health starts with prioritizing your mental health. So if you're interested in learning more, please do head to findyourwords.org. It is a great place to find mental health resources for yourself and the people you love. I would even recommend checking it out, as someone who went through the site, even if you don't feel like you're in need of anything. It's just a cool thing to pay more attention to learn, to be aware of. I think it's super valuable to go through that. But we do also have an interactive video, which is Mental Health Matters. The interactive video is out now. The chatbot should be able to send you all the link, but you can also find it at findyourwords.org/presence of mind. And completing the video will earn you a 10% discount to the Cloud9 store and a chance to win one of 5 C9 Secret Lab chairs. Giveaway winners will be announced during our Thursday, May 27th stream, which is pretty soon, so you still do have a little bit of time. I was like completely just blank on the date just then. I'm like, what? We're not at May yet. It's tomorrow. I was gonna say this month, but technically not yet. And you can enter the giveaway up to 2 times, so definitely check that out. It will help you understand how mental health is connected to your total health, the importance of making mental health a priority, and how to find available resources to help. I'm sorry for all of those words, but they're all good words. I swear.
You found all of your words.
I did find my words. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to Gary and Dr. Watford. You guys have been absolutely awesome guests. And to everyone else, we will see you here in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.